What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN. I'm your host, Chris Meaney. Thanks for taking the time to hang out on this Monday. And what a Monday it is. Not one, but two Monday night football games. One already in the books. The Kansas City Chiefs took care of the Buffalo Bills. And it looks like the Arizona Cardinals are going to take care of the Dallas Cowboys. Boy, it's currently at halftime right now as I'm talking to you guys, and the Cowboys do not look good. And there's a couple takeaways for me. Obviously, Ezekiel Elliott putting the ball on the ground twice again this week, and last week had some issues with fumbles as well. And no CeeDee Lamb. Where is CeeDee Lamb? We're all looking for CeeDee Lamb. Of course, Andy Dalton is under center, making his first start with the Dallas Cowboys. He was okay last week, and it was against the Giants. I believe he was 9 for 11, just over 100 yards, and was able to get his Cowboys down into field goal range and beat the New York Giants. But I don't want to put too much into this pitiful performance from what I saw in the first half from the Cowboys. I mean, defensively, they can't cover anybody. Offensively, they can't get it right. So not going to spend too much time on the Dallas Cowboys, but I am a happy guy here today getting Kyler Murray's rushing prop. It was 40.5. We had that at FTNBets.com. We got that with just about a couple minutes into the second quarter. And, you know, Christian Kirk was a big-time topic for me in episode 1. Wide receiver 76 heading into this week 6, and you know, he had it wasn't a rushing touchdown. I guess he has the 2 touchdowns as a bit of a flip. It was a passing touchdown on the first one, Kyler to Christian Kirk, and then he hit him with an 80-yard bomb. And heading into this week, and what I had said in episode 1 was the matchup against the Cowboys, phenomenal. Seattle next week, the bye, but Seattle again coming up, and then, you know, a couple decent matchups as well. And, you know, DeAndre Hopkins is always going to get that top corner. Always. He's always going to garner that attention, and it's going to leave some shots for, you know, Kyler to take some shots downfield to Christian Kirk, and that's what we saw on the 80-yard bomb. And, you know, heading into this week, he had the 9th highest ADOT in the NFL, the highest on his team at 15.63, and, you know, it was just about 60 air yards shy of DeAndre Hopkins as well. So he's a big play threat. He's a, you know, kind of boomer bust. I think he should be owned, and his ownership in Yahoo leagues is hovering around the 40% mark. It's even, you know, I think it's like 22, 23% NFL.com leagues, and ESPN leagues is certainly fewer than 50% of leagues too. So he's going to be a big pickup, and we'll get to a few other waiver wire pickups a little bit. This show here is going to be a little bit of a takeaway from week 6. Take a look at some touches and target leaders, some big takeaways, hit the waiver wire, and then an early look at week 7. Plus, I'm going to go over some of the bets and the props and the DFS calls that I had from episode 2 of Mean Streets. And, you know, like I said, I'm going to hold myself accountable and just kind of break down where I went wrong and, you know, where I went right. And it was a pretty decent week for me. Luckily, you know, maybe just beginner's luck or the show debut, and, you know, the football gods were shining on me, because I never want to go below 500. I'd like to be obviously as perfect as possible. Not for me. For you guys, like I said before, I want you guys to be able to win some cash. And today I'm going to be giving away an NFL betting package at FTNBets.com. And I gave away the Fantasy Football Platinum package at FTNFantasy.com. And that went to D-Gram. So congratulations, D-Gram. If you're just tuning in for the first time, if this is your third time watching the show, welcome. Thanks for hanging out for all 3 of these episodes. And if you're just discovering this show, welcome as well. And the one thing I will say again is just subscribe to FTN's YouTube page and screenshot a picture subscribing, and then send that over to me at MeanStreetsEP3 at gmail.com. Again, that's MeanStreetsEP3 at gmail.com. And I will be giving away an FTN Daily package as well. Not in this episode, in the next episode. And I have a bunch of names in the hat again. So those who had already screenshotted me subscribing over at MeanStreetsEP3 at gmail.com, your name's still in the hat. And if you don't win the FTN Bets package today, it will still be in the hat in the draw for the FTN Daily package as well. So appreciate all the support that I've gotten over the past 3 or 4 days for this show. And, you know, unfortunately, I didn't get the picks, the episode 2 with the picks and the props and the DFS plays out until, you know, late Saturday, early Sunday morning. Drop the ball there. That episode will be out on Friday, so the shelf life will be a lot larger, so you'll be able to hopefully, you know, find the show, watch the show, and get some picks. But I had some feedback, and I love hearing that people had some success in DFS and with the picks. So let's start there before we get into some of the big takeaways. Let's just bring up this awesome board for my man George Putz. He put together this pick board for me, a little bit of a chalkboard and some eraser marks, and not bad. I'm happy with that start, 8-4. We got the Kansas City Chiefs today, 4.5. I said that anytime the Chiefs, are favored by 4.5 or fewer than 7 points, you got to jump all over it. Kind of sweated it out a little bit. It looked like the Bills were going to be able to maybe get that backdoor cover there, but we got it nonetheless. So 9-4 overall, but pretty happy with this start. And we'll just go over some of the props. And 4-2 on the props. We had Jamison Crowder there, 5.5 receptions. Happy to get that Jamison Crowder. I said earlier that I didn't really want to call anything a lock, and I'm not really going to call anything a lock ever. That's silly. That's stupid. There's nothing is a lock as appealing as props may look. Things happen in the NFL, but Jamison Crowder here, anytime you see his prop total at 5.5, I think you just need to jump all over it. I mean, Crowder only had 48 yards in week 6. Overall, it wasn't a great day unless you were in a full-point PPR league. And if you are in a full-point PPR league, I would consider Jamison Crowder a wide receiver 3 or a flex play the rest of the way. I mean, this Jets team they're historically bad on both ends of the football, offensively and defensively, but there's just nothing there outside of Jamison Crowder to get excited about, no matter who is under center, if it's Sam Darnold or Joe Flacco. He's got at least 10 targets in every single game and at least 7 catches in each game so far this season, averaging 11 targets per game, which is tied for the third most in the league. And coming into this week, he had the second highest target share in the NFL. And this dates back to last season as well. Just got a lot of volume with the Jets in the slot. So pretty happy we got that. And, we got it pretty early. I believe he had 5 catches in the first half. The other prop there was David Montgomery. We got that one early as well. And, he has been a player in the passing game. He was a little bit disappointing on the ground. We'll get to him in a little bit in terms of my DFS plays from week 6, but 25.5 receiving yards and 39 yards, at least 30 receiving yards in 4 of his past 5 games, 16 grabs over that span. And, one game with last year, looking at last year's numbers overall, 1 game with 30 receiving yards. So he's really taking advantage of Tariq Cohen being sidelined, and he's just getting a bulk of the work through the air, getting a couple of checkdowns from Nick Foles, and he's been involved through the air. And you gotta like it because he's been very disappointing on the ground. He had the touchdown vulture there, and Nick Foles ran it in. It looked like originally Montgomery was going to get that touchdown, but it just hasn't been there from him. And I still question Matt Nagy's play calling, but nonetheless, we're getting some usage out of him through the air. So I think Montgomery owners have to, take the good with the bad. Yeah, he's not that efficient on the ground, but he is, getting involved through the air. Like I said, 16 catches over his last 5 games. Kenny Golladay was next, 65.5 receiving yards. We got that one pretty easily as well, 105 receiving yards. Golladay just looks fresh after missing the first couple games and then had the bye week. I kind of sweated that out. It didn't look like he was getting a lot of work early. It was a lot of DeAndre Swift, which we'll get to, but it just takes 1 or 2 catches from Kenny Golladay to get to that kind of total. 65.5 is usually a number he's probably going to be at for the rest of the year. And I know sometimes it seems like it's a pretty big number, but again, he's just a big body, and he can get that in 1 catch, right? Matthew Stafford just throw it out to him, and significant ADOT and the air yards are all going to go his way, especially with Marvin Jones, another dud game from him. You can go ahead and cut Marvin Jones now if you weren't already. I said in episode 1 not to start him, but maybe to keep him if you were short for wide receiver depth on your team, and depending on how deep your league is. He just doesn't look good. He looks slow. He doesn't look like he has that step for him. The next one was Jameson. I did it again. I called him Jameson last week, and I call him Jameson again today. James Robinson, over 3.5 catches and over 24.5 receiving yards. We got one of the 2. And we got it at the very end, and it was plus money, the 3.5 receptions, so it was nice to get the 4 catches. He had a receiving touchdown at the end. And I consider this a bad beat. He had 24 receiving yards, so we needed 1 more yard at him through the air. Nonetheless, it is a loss. And 1-2 is not bad. 4 for 24. We got lucky, I guess, at the end with the receiving touchdown and the catch. It was garbage time. So, it is what it is. I consider it a bad beat, but like I said, we got a little lucky there with the Robinson catch. And then the last prop, not even close here, with Mark Andrews, plus 120 for an anytime touchdown. He only had 2 grabs for 21 yards. Very disappointing. I got burned in DFS by Mark Andrews as well. It was a terrific matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. Coming in, they allowed 5 touchdowns to tight ends, and they allowed a 6th. But it was Nick Boyle who found the end zone, not Mark Andrews. Tennessee by 3.5. Got a little lucky there, I will be honest. It looked early like we were going to get that. The Texans come back into the game. How about Vrabel as just an unbelievable coach for the Titans? And go follow Warren Sharp and check out his recent tweets and talking about him putting another player on the field to get the too many men on the field just to stop the clock, knowing that the Texans were going to be able to score. And at the very end of the game, they just had enough time, 4 seconds, to find A.J. Brown in the end zone. So it just kind of worked out perfectly for the Titans in that game. Check out Warren Sharp, and if you don't already follow him already, he's a fantastic follow. And he does some amazing work. And if you don't follow him, you're really missing out. So just take the time to head on over there and give him a follow. But man, Ryan Tannehill does it again. He has looked awesome. And it's a large enough sample size now, dating back to last year and the start of this season, to see over the full course of a year just how efficient he has been in this offense. Run the play action with Derrick Henry, and he has a beast in A.J. Brown as well. So Ryan Tannehill looks phenomenal, just not getting the respect. And I see him still ranked as, outside the top 12 every single week at the quarterback position, and, not owning enough fantasy leagues too. So you could just feel confident starting him every single week. I mean, I took some shots at Baker Mayfield last week, but it seems puzzling to me that Baker gets started in more fantasy leagues than Ryan Tannehill. And just, maybe that's just name value, but Ryan Tannehill, he needs to start getting the respect that he deserves. So we got the Titans. We lucked out, let's be honest. Sometimes when the game goes to overtime, you only win by a field goal. They were able to win by 6 there with Derrick Henry, and more on Henry. But man, what an absolute beast Derrick Henry is. We got the Steelers pretty easily, 3.5. They crushed the Browns as I expected. It was just going to be about Big Ben up against Baker Mayfield, and the Steelers defense is phenomenal. They got a ton of pressure on Baker and made him look silly. This one completely way off. This is my bad. The Packers, I didn't want to overthink this. I thought the Packers were going to be able to take care of business in Tampa Bay. And, Aaron Rodgers looked really bad. And according to Pro Football Focus, the 4th worst passing grade of his career at 45.8. He did not look good, but we'll give some credit to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They got some corners who can play. They're generating a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And Atlanta and Minnesota over 54. We got that with ease. We almost had it there. And as I'm watching the game here live, it looks like Arizona, just another turnover there. The Dallas Cowboys are an absolute mess. And the NFC East is an absolute mess. It's hard to believe that either Washington, New York, Dallas, or Philadelphia will host an NFL playoff game this year. And, it could only be a 5-win team, and it could be coming down to week 17. 5 wins, you get the division, you get into the playoffs, or you lose and you get yourself a top 5 pick. That's how bad the division is. But back to Atlanta, Minnesota. Atlanta almost did it themselves with 40 points to get to this total. And, this is why I like Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins from a DFS standpoint too. Both of these secondaries are just atrocious. Cleveland, Indianapolis got this one wrong. I had the under 46. It cruised to the over. Phillip Rivers had himself a day. T.Y. Hilton did not. 1 catch for 11. I said on episode 2 of Mean Streets, Drew Livingstone had asked a question in the comment section on our YouTube page if he should trade T.Y. Hilton for J.D. McKissic. I said, absolutely, go ahead and do that. You had your opportunity with T.Y. having a big game. Hopefully, Drew, you were able to make that deal. I like J.D. McKissic. We'll talk about him again. If you've been following my work this year at FTN, you know that I've been a fan of J.D. McKissic over the past 3 weeks, and he showed up again last week. So we'll talk about him in just a little bit. And then the final one was Miami and the New York Jets under 47. I think my exact words were Miami will do their part, but the Jets probably won't be able to score 14 points. They didn't even score a point. This is how bad that offense is. And we'll touch on the Jets total again this week. They're playing the Bills at 48. I'll just give it to you right now. I like the under, because if they can't score any points against Miami, I don't know how they're going to be able to score any points against the Buffalo Bills, even though their defense looked a little leaky on the ground on Monday night. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was able to run all over them. But again, 48, the total. I mean, you just hammer it now because I think that's going to come down. I don't know if the Bills are going to score 48 points. They'll probably score 30. Will the Jets score 17, 18? It's very unlikely. So we add in the Chiefs there at 4.5 and we get to 5-2. So not bad. I'll take it. It wasn't all good for me. It's not all, pat myself on the back here. I had the New England Patriots in my parlay that I gave you guys. My apologies there. And, I really just dropped the ball there, to be honest. I mean, New England looked like a team that only practiced twice in the last 14 days, didn't they? They looked really rusty. Cam looked awful. He was dealing with COVID, and, he came back, and, he was obviously fine. There's no negative test there. He wouldn't be, or positive COVID tests, or he wouldn't have been able to play. But he struggled. A lot of turnovers, and the defense was fine. Drew Lock even gave him a couple opportunities to get back in the game. It looked like we potentially could have got New England at the end, but that was my apologies there for picking New England. And, I'm out of Survivor, so I'm a little ticked off about it, having the Pats. It just wasn't a smart play by me. I should have easily went Miami, and I was back and forth on Miami and New England, and I dropped the ball there. So it's not all great, but I will take above 500. And let's go over my DFS plays quickly before we run through some injuries and we get into the waiver wire and then take a look at the early week 7 there. CeeDee Lamb not getting anything done, still not getting anything done. This is probably bad news for the entire Dallas Cowboys wide receiver core, isn't it, with Andy Dalton? This is a big yikes for the boys. So for DFS, Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins, those were my plays, and couldn't be happier with either of those guys. And just looking overall, actually, I'll run through at the very end just every position and just a couple takeaways from the fantasy. I know that you can do it yourself and just hit the drop-down menu on Yahoo or ESPN, wherever it is you play, and see the leaders. But, we'll just have a little bit of a conversation, myself and you listening at home or wherever it is. Maybe you're on the road listening on iTunes or Spotify. Or maybe watching on YouTube. And by the way, I will give out that FTN Bets package just towards the end of the show. Just hang on a little bit longer and we'll get that package. We'll deliver the winner here for you. So Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins worked out. It was simple. Just for me, it was just all about the secondary. I know they were popular plays, but it was a high total game. Both defenses are awful. I'm going to continue to probably play Matt Ryan and just quarterbacks against that Falcons defense. So my running backs, I thought I did okay here. I mean, I had Henry. He was my favorite running back on the board. I know there was a lot of people talking on social media that, people who played Henry were a little lucky because, he had 5 targets, which were a career high for him. He got the 2 balls, had over 50 receiving yards. I never count on Henry catching a few balls, and I know people don't want to play him on DraftKings because they'd like to play some running backs who catch a few balls, and I understand that. You want to shoot for maximum upside, and Henry's not going to be a guy that, he could go multiple games the rest of the year and not having any catches. But, over the past couple of years, he has seen an increase in targets and reception. It's not, world breaking. He's not a big time player in the passing game. I don't expect him to ever, get to 30 plus catches in a season, but he has at least seen that uptick over the past couple of years. So who knows? Like, it's not fair for us to count it out. Yeah, he had 5 targets and that was a career high, but 2-3 catches in a game is something that we could expect, but it wasn't really about that for me. It was the matchup. The Texans, as I said, they couldn't stop anybody this season. They had given up a ton of 20-yard plays and a couple 40-yard plays and just big chunk plays. And Derrick Henry is an absolute beast, and 200 yards from him on the ground is not the first time he's done it. In fact, he's done it twice against this Texans squad. He's the only player in NFL history, I read from ESPN Stats and Info, to have 200 yards and 2 touchdowns against the same team twice. So he's absolutely owned them. He's got at least 2 touchdowns in 3 straight games now. What more can we say about Derrick Henry? He in my opinion, is the safest running back to play every single week because there's so many teams out there where we're trying to guess what they're going to do, right? Like Sean McVay says that he wants to get Cam Akers more involved, but yet he plays 1 snap. There's a lot of coaches out there that just, you have a hard time figuring out what the hell they want to do. Do they want to run? Do they want to pass? Who are they using in their backfield? And do they overthink things? We could easily sit here and talk about Doug Peterson, for till the cows come home about some of the decisions that he makes, and some have been good and some have been bad, obviously, and, calls a Philly special in the Super Bowl. Good. He decides to kick the ball away against the Bengals instead of going for it, settles for the tie. Bad. So the one thing that we know with the Titans is they want to run the football with Derrick Henry, and he's always going to be among the leaders in rushing attempts. And if he can catch a few balls out of the backfield, good, we're on our way. So he was a great play. It worked out for us. Anybody that played Derrick Henry, congratulations. If you're playing on FanDuel, it's a little bit of a different story. You get half the point for a catch. He's an automatic lock there. He's a great cash game play. Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery, and James Robinson were my other running backs. Now, they were just okay. When I say okay, it's just because it wasn't a big running back week, as I just take a look here on the fly in just terms of, fantasy points at the running back position. So Henry in a full point PPR league, 40 fantasy points, and then a big drop off, DeAndre Swift, 27. If you were able to have him, my goodness, good for you. Ronald Jones, 26, another great game. We'll talk about him in just a little bit. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, obviously on the Monday Night Football game, had 20. But after that, a lot of running backs in the 17, 15, 16 point range. So it wasn't a big running back day. Like Alexander Madison was a complete bust. What did I tell you guys about just fading trendy players, buzzy players, especially after big games? But yeah, so you got Jonathan Taylor in here, 15 points. James Robinson, 15 points. And then down the list, Dave Montgomery, 13 points. So Robinson and Taylor were top 10 running backs in terms of fantasy, and then Montgomery just outside the top 13. But they didn't really return value. You were better off, maybe spending down on a J.D. McKissic in a full point PPR, like 14 points. So as much as I sit here and say that Taylor and Montgomery and Robinson, were decent plays, they really weren't. So I can't really take the W for that, but I will take the W for Derrick Henry. Adam Thielen, Julio Jones, Juju, Patrick, and Preston were the wide receivers I really pushed. Dropped the ball on Justin Jefferson as much as I like Kirk Cousins. I had some Jefferson, but I had more Adam Thielen. Kyler Murray rushes in another touchdown. That's his league-high 6 rushing touchdowns from Kyler. As I mentioned, we had the rushing prop earlier. Heading into the Week 6 matchup, he had 59 rushing yards per game on the ground, which led all quarterbacks. So Kyler, the breakout is absolutely here, and the Dallas Cowboys look very, very bad. So that's the bad thing about Drake. I mean, he had a rushing touchdown in this game earlier, but Kyler now, that's at least 8 red zone rushing attempts for Kyler Murray. And, he's going to steal a couple of those potential rushing touchdowns from Kenyon Drake. But Drake owners should at least be happy he found the end zone today, and he'll probably get a lot of play as it's a 28-3 game right now, with 7:53 left in the third quarter. So he'll probably get a lot of play in the fourth. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place sidetracking, but I'm giving you some live analysis here on the Monday Night Football game between Arizona and Dallas. So back to the wide receivers. Adam Thielen did found the end zone, had a touchdown, but it wasn't good enough, right? For his price and what we really wanted, you needed to have Justin Jefferson in your lineups. And shout out to my boy Kyle Murray. This guy's a stud. I told you guys in episode 1, episode 2 that we had a lot of sharps at FTN. He's one of them. He was all over a lot of these plays, and Ryan and Cousins and Julio and Justin Jefferson. Make sure you check him out every time he hits up FTN live, and he's all over the projections, and he gives you a really good idea of just what to expect on a weekly basis in terms of ownership projections and DraftKings and FanDuel. He's a terrific follow. And if you have the FTN daily package, which I will give away on the next episode, you'll just see how convenient that package is for sure. So good stuff from my boy Murray there. But yeah, Thielen, Julio, we're just never going to be able to get Julio at that price point ever again. And a couple of times I've said this before, but recency bias is absolutely huge in DFS. And a lot of people just unsure if they wanted to play Julio, even in their season-long leagues. And what I had said on this show, that I had him ranked around wide receiver 15. Obviously, that wasn't good enough. But if you have a guy like Julio, you play him all the time. If you sat him, you were absolutely burned, and that's what happens. Yeah, you can take the 1, the 2, the 0. He could come out, and that's just the way it is. But you could also give up a huge game, which could have been the difference in your seasonal format. So you always just play your studs. That's the biggest lesson I have in fantasy. But we're never going to be able to get Julio, with that low of an ownership and that low of a price. So that was an opportunity that hopefully you were able to take advantage of. Juju Smith-Schuster, another disappointing outing from him. I'm done suggesting him, although I will say if you do play multiple lineups going forward, people will be off of Juju after 2 dud games. And seeing that he was 3rd among wide receivers in snaps on his team, right? Chase Claypool found the end zone again. I think it was a rushing touchdown, but he had more snaps, led the way in terms of snaps for wide receivers with Deontay Johnson sideline, and then James Washington had more snaps than Juju. So I would consider Juju a buy low candidate. I tried to get him earlier in the year, and now he's been offered to me in one of my leagues, and I'm kind of on the fence because it's a package involving Michael Thomas, and I don't think I want to go there, but if you're a big Juju Smith-Schuster fan, now is the time to get him. And if you're being ultra contrarian moving forward, then you could probably play him in DFS. But it's concerning. It's certainly concerning. It was an ideal matchup in the slot against the Browns, and he didn't really do anything. Tim Patrick, I was on him, more on him in a little bit. Preston Williams got the touchdown, could have been better. Just caught a couple balls, had the touchdown early. Wasn't good enough. Mentioned Andrews for the tight end position. I hit you high and I hit you low with Trey Burton. We got 2 touchdowns from Trey Burton. And the Colts are on a bye. So I again, this is me talking to you for a 3rd straight time about Trey Burton. Obviously, I love the touchdown pass that he threw to Nick Foles in the Super Bowl, but this is not me being biased. I've seen him before excel with Zach Ertz sideline and what Frank Reich has been able to do, utilizing him in the offense with Philly, and now 3 straight weeks utilizing him in the offense, finding the end zone a couple times, no Mo Alley Cox, and just running a lot of routes and getting more targets than Jack Doyle, who also found the end zone, by the way. But they just like to use their tight ends in Indy. We know this with Rivers, and we know this with Frank Reich. So that wraps up the DFS. I consider this a successful week. Hopefully we can carry that over, and that episode will be on Friday, and we'll look at the picks and the props and some DFS plays. So I'll get that out a little bit earlier, and hopefully we can continue to have some success here. But if you are looking for an FTN Bets package or daily package, use the promo code Meaney, and you will get a 10% discount. All right, so let's take a look at some of the injuries, and we'll find out what it means here. Obviously, the big ones, Miles Sanders, a knee injury, already ruled out for Thursday. It doesn't seem to be super serious. The Eagles have the Giants this week, and then the Cowboys, and then they're on a bye, and then they get the Giants too. So it's too bad because this is where the schedule was starting to turn. And for Miles Sanders, 6.1 yards per attempt, led everybody in the NFL. And he was top 5 in rushing as well. Had the long run a couple weeks ago against the Steelers. That was really all he did. And he got double-digit carries and was stuffed really every single attempt. But he had that long run, and that's what he can do. He has that burst and the agility to take one to the house. And then he almost did it again against Baltimore. And that's where he suffered that knee injury. He got caught at the very end, and he lost the football. And then J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, finally had done something in his NFL career and jumped on the football and the touchdown. That was a low blow. I'm sorry, JJ. But you've been pretty disappointing, let's be honest. But you got the touchdown there. So for Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, and let's just talk about Boston Scott right now. He's been in this situation before. I'll touch on him coming into the game against the Baltimore Ravens, and he played the most snaps. It was 31, but he only touched the ball 4 times. But Philly was really playing catch-up in that game in the second half. And, credit Carson Wentz, who I'll touch on him in just a little bit, because he's a streamer this week against the Giants. But back to Boston Scott here for a second. I look back at last season when nobody was healthy, like Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson, and it was really only Ertz and Goddard, and Miles Sanders wasn't 100%. And Boston Scott was good. I mean, he had 26 catches and 28 targets in his final 5 games of 2019. He also had 2 games during that stretch with double-digit carries. One of those games came against the Giants, where he totaled 128 yards on 16 touches. He had 6 grabs for 69 yards. So he just seems to actually, when he's on the field, he seems to get more involved through the air than Miles Sanders does. It seems like he's the back that maybe Doug Peterson trusts more, or Wentz trusts more throwing. You saw Sanders drop that ball in the end zone on Sunday. So I think we could see maybe Scott catch a few more balls than what Miles Sanders has been able to do so far this season. So I'm not saying to go and spend all your fab on him. As a Miles Sanders owner myself, I will be aggressive trying to get Boston Scott just so I have somebody playing this week in what I think is a good matchup against the Giants. And I think if you are in a situation where you need a running back, we got some teams on bye here this week, and I got them written down and down the list here on my rundown. So I'll get to those in a little bit. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I know the Colts potentially. So, you could be without Jonathan Taylor, and there's still multiple injuries at the running back position as well. So I think, if you need help, Boston Scott could be a guy that, touches the ball 15, 20 times this week, maybe next week. It looks like I don't have any official news on Miles Sanders, but it could be a couple weeks. It's not as significant as Zach Ertz, who is out 3 to 4 weeks with an ankle injury. I think you can just go ahead and drop Zach Ertz now. If you have deep bench spots, maybe you can hold him. He is top 5 in catches at the tight end position, but he's just not doing anything with them. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, the schedule was starting to turn. Looks like Deshaun Jackson could be back this week. Dallas Goedert, it's looking like it's a couple weeks. So we may not get Goddard back until after the bye. So it could be week 10. I would pick up Goddard if you can. Maybe just stash him on the IR. And if you can stash Ertz like in Yahoo leagues when you got the IR plus, depends on your format, maybe you can stash him. I got some tight end replacements in a little bit because Jonnu Smith has an ankle sprain. It looks like it's minor, so he is questionable to play against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I got some tight end replacements in just a little bit as we hit the waiver wire. But Raheem Mostert, another injury, ankle, most likely going to land on the IR, according to Kyle Shanahan. I said not to drop Jerick McKinnon. I know it was a dud game from him last week, and this week was underwhelming. And it still will be a crowded backfield. We don't know when Tevin Coleman's going to come back. And Jeff Wilson's a guy that's most likely going to get the red zone touches and the goal line touches, despite Jerick McKinnon having a few red zone touches himself and, finding the end zone in his first 4 games with San Fran. But, you need running back depth, and I think McKinnon has some value in a full point PPR setting, but Shanahan will rotate through most of his running backs. Mark Ingram came out of that game with an ankle injury against the Eagles, and I had said when we were talking about holds or drops that Ingram could be dropped if you were in a deeper league. It's nice to have that depth, that depth at the running back position, and we would just need an injury out of the back, someone out of Ingram, Edwards, or Dobbins, somebody to go down for the backfield just to be a little bit more clear. So we had Dobbins get the 4 targets, had a few carries, was more successful on the ground than Gus Edwards, but it was Edwards who had the red zone touchdown. So it's still a mess. Lamar Jackson ran a lot. That's a positive sign for Lamar Jackson owners because he's been dealing with the knee injury. There was no design runs in week 5 against the Bengals. He had several design runs against the Eagles and had the big score, and I believe he had 70 some odd rushing yards on the ground. So positive news there. So let's just run through the waiver wire for me. I think Boston Scott is up at the top. I like what I've seen from him towards the end of last season, as I mentioned, and I like the schedule moving forward with the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Giants and Washington Cowboys. The schedule does turn, and we could be without Miles Sanders for a couple weeks. That's assuming that Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly is already owned, because Austin Eckler is definitely going to be out for some time, and we haven't seen those 2 backs now in a couple weeks. But that Monday Night Football game in week 5, Justin Jackson looked really good. He caught a few balls out of the backfield. He had a 40-yard run. He was getting all the play in the fourth quarter and in overtime. And, Kelly just hasn't been all that efficient. I think that Anthony Lynn could ride the hot hand, but I think Justin Jackson starts, and I would go as far as saying that I believe he'll get like 60% of the snaps and 60% of the touches out of the backfield. So those 2 should be owned. I think they're better long-term plays than Boston Scott, but if you're in a pinch, Scott should certainly be owned. J.D. McKissic we'll get to in a little bit. LaMichael Pirine, 7 for 27, 2 catches on 3 targets, playing the Bills this week. Just saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire run all over the Bills. They haven't been able to stop the run. It is the Jets after all, and Frank Gore is still sprinkled in, but Pirine has much more upside than Frank Gore if you were deciding between the 2, or you had Gore in a deep league. Pirine is somebody you should take a flyer on. I don't know if I feel comfortable starting him in a deeper league, maybe 14, 16 as a flex potentially. You could potentially get by, but he should be rostered anyways just for depth. Giovanni Bernard Joe Mixon left and came back. I just think Gio's a decent stash. We've seen him before have control of the backfield. It was Andy Dalton's team at the time, but he can catch balls out of the backfield. They run a lot of plays. Joe Burrow is passing more than anybody in the NFL. So if Mixon did go down, and I know he's been questionable over the past couple weeks, a chest injury popped up a couple Saturdays ago, and he played and he had the big game against the Jags. If anything were to happen to him, I think Giovanni Bernard would be an RB2, somebody who would get about 20 touches, catch a few balls out of the backfield, get some goal line carries. So he's a decent stash. I already mentioned Gus Edwards, 14 for 26, and it was JK who had the 9 for 28. So it's still crowded. I think both guys should be owned. I believe Dobbins has the higher ceiling. Maybe it's his backfield a little bit later on, but I haven't heard too much from Mark Ingram. He could return, and it's just an absolute mess again. T. Higgins absolutely needs to be owned if you were just on the fence about him in an 8-team league or a 10-team league. He has 10 deep targets so far this season. Deep targets, it's at least 20 yards, and he's tied for the 10th most with Justin Jefferson. AJ Green has 11, so he's just has one more than T. Higgins. But T. Higgins, another phenomenal game. I just mentioned Joe Burrow and leading the league in passing attempts. He needs to be owned. Mike Williams had that big Monday night game, and I think there's something there. I was unsure about Mike Williams with Justin Herbert. It was a whole lot of Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry, and then all the backs out of the backfield. But Mike Williams is a big body wide receiver. He, out of Clemson, always is going up and getting it. Some injuries have been a concern in his NFL career and his college career. But, a big, ADOT guy, yards per catch guy, a huge big play guy. And Justin Herbert looks phenomenal. He looks like an absolute stud, very accurate, has a deep ball. And he used Mike Williams in that game a couple times against the Saints. So I think that I'm starting to feel a little bit better about Mike Williams being like a borderline wide receiver 3 or flex play. Christian Kirk, I already talked about him off the top of the show, but it just makes me smile because I have a lot of Kirk and I'm a believer in him. Tim Patrick, mentioned him in the DFS, but just going into him just a little bit deeper. 29 targets, 12 have been at least 20 yards. That's tied for 5th. 3 straight games with double-digit fantasy points, back-to-back games with 100 yards through the air, and he's got 2 TDs over his last 3 games too. So no Cortland Sutton, he's not coming back this year. KJ Hamler is sidelined. I think Jerry Jeudy's going to get a lot of the attention. So Patrick, it's a couple games in a row. Like I mentioned, it was Drew Lock last year towards the end of the season. It was Drew Lock on Sunday against the Pats, and it was Ripon a couple weeks ago against the Jets. So Patrick's been involved. He's interesting. He's hanging around waiver wire. Laviska Shenault had a disappointing game, but I still like him. A lot of DJ Chark. It was nice to see all the volume that Chark got. Keelan Cole is another guy who's been getting some deep passes. So it looks like Shenault may be 3rd on that depth chart. I had a question just before I came on here, Christian Kirk or Shenault. I would lean Kirk, but it's close. I think both should be rostered. I just like this Arizona offense. I just love it. And the fact that defenses have to respect Kyler Murray and, he can take shots deep down the field. And I mentioned the A-dot there. So I think Kirk just has a higher ceiling, but I like both of those guys. I think they're both terrific wide receivers. And John Hightower I wanted to bring up for deep leagues. Don't know about Sean Jackson. It does look like he potentially could return, and that would ruin John Hightower. And I'm not saying John Hightower is a great start, but I'm saying if you're playing maybe in the showdown on Thursday night and you're in a deep league, 9 of his 19 targets have been deep targets. The one problem is he only has 1 catch, right? He had that drop, and Carson Wentz he aired one out to him. It was a perfect ball, and he dropped it. 340 air yards over the last 2 weeks is the most in the NFL. So Carson Wentz has been starving for a deep threat guy for his whole career, really. They brought in Mike Wallace and Torrey Smith, and none of those guys worked out. And Sean Jackson hasn't been able to work out. When he's healthy, it's worked out, but he hasn't had that deep threat. We thought Jalen Reagor could be that. He hooked up with Jalen Reagor, by the way, in week 1 or week 2. Sorry from forgetting. It was a 55-yard grab. That was Carson Wentz's longest completion since 2018. He just needs a deep threat guy. Hightower's been that guy that he's targeted, but they just haven't been deep. They just haven't been able to connect. So it's a little disappointing, but just keep an eye on him. I just thought it was interesting that he's had 340 air yards over the last 2 weeks, which is a league high. Preston Williams had the touchdown, may get dropped this week with Miami on a bye. If he does get dropped, I think he's a decent stash. So going over to tight ends, I hit up all these waiver wire backs and wide receivers. Tight ends, Anthony Ferkser, 8 catches on 9 targets, 113 yards, had the touchdown. If Jonnu Smith misses some time, he could be an option for you. Darren Fells, I think, is a better option if Jordan Akins is out again. 6 for 87, a touchdown. 2 for 57 in week 5 and a touchdown. So he's got TDs in back-to-back games. And let's take a look at some quarterback streams. We have Matthew Stafford at the Atlanta Falcons. Absolutely. Justin Herbert against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Absolutely. I think Herbert is more than a stream, honestly. I think he's a perfect second quarterback in Superflex leagues. And I think we may be talking about him as a borderline QB1. I mean, it's after the first couple, they're roughly all the same, and you're just playing the matchups. It's that tight. Teddy Bridgewater against the Saints, I wouldn't go there. I have a lot of respect for the Saints defense. Teddy B was just okay. Actually, wasn't all that great against the Bears. Tough matchup. I had mentioned fading him. It's okay. You get the revenge narrative there. He does have some weapons. DJ Moore had a good game. Robbie Anderson is probably going to get Lattimore. Even though they've been moving Robbie Anderson around quite a bit. I wouldn't go there. I'd rather Herbert, Matthew Stafford, and I'd rather Wentz against the Giants. As I mentioned, 37 rushing yards in 3 of his 4 games, 49 last week for Wentz, 4 rushing touchdowns, career high, and 30 yards per game, despite getting sacked 25 times, a league high 25 times already. The thing that I've noticed with Wentz is the offensive line. I mean, it's brutal. They have, 2 starters? 2 starters on their team, and it's Kelsey and Wentz. It's not great, but he's running for his life, which is, creating a bit of a fantasy floor for him as well. 29 fantasy points against Baltimore, 19 Pittsburgh, 22 against San Fran, as I mentioned, Giants and Dallas coming up on the schedule. DST, defenses to stream, KC at Denver, Cleveland against the Bengals, Philadelphia against the Giants. You can go Giants against Philadelphia. I think that either of those teams are interesting, and the same thing with Washington and Dallas. I think both of those teams are certainly interesting defenses. I probably wouldn't go the Dallas route, even though Kyle Allen looked just bad, very bad on Sunday against Dallas. So that's it for the waiver wire and the streams. Any questions, you can certainly hit me up at Chris Meaney on Twitter, and you can definitely ask a question on our YouTube page, and I will get to it in terms of just fab, what you want to spend, or maybe there's a player I didn't get to or whatnot. So I do want to just quickly touch on just a few other takeaways that I had, and we'll bring up here just some wide receiver target leaders. And you'll see there at the top, it was, as I mentioned, we had a big game from DJ Chark, which was nice to see because he was questionable heading into the game and just didn't really know what to expect from Chark in that game, whether we should start him or whether we should sit him. But that was positive that he got all that work. So 14 targets. Crowder, we already talked about, 13. Terry McLaurin, 12. Didn't do a whole lot with them, but still just getting about 50% of his team's air yards. So that's positive news. DJ Moore, AJ Green, Will Fuller, Justin Jefferson with 11 each. Julio Jones, Zach Ertz, Travis Fulgham, Devontae Adams, George Kittle, Robert Woods with 10. This was before the 2 Monday Night Football games, by the way. My boy George just with the nice, man, so sharp. I absolutely love DJ Chark's shoes there. The gold. So Crowder, we already touched on. AJ Green was moved around quite a bit. It was interesting. Some 3 wide receiver sets. Zach Taylor getting creative with Higgins and Boyd and Green. I liked it. I liked what I saw there. I don't think AJ Green is somebody that you can start with confidence week in and week out. I think he makes for a decent bye week replacement or an injury replacement. But 8 catches, 96 yards in week 6. That was a season high for him. He's been dropped in about 20% of Yahoo leagues over the past week or so. It's possible he can be on your waiver wire. I had said before, just to kind of stash him, that you can't start him. Maybe if you're feeling a little uneasy and you have the wide receiver depth, that you could sell high on him now. There's always somebody that likes AJ Green, and you get this bit of a taste of old AJ Green, and people think that maybe it can continue to happen. I just think there's going to be some inconsistent games from him. So I would move on. I think now is your opportunity to sell him if you want. Let's touch on Justin Jefferson just quickly for a second, because I know a lot of people probably dropped him over the first couple games. I think he only had 5 catches for about 70 yards or so. People are probably kicking themselves right now because the rookie wideout has at least 103 yards in 3 of his past 4 games, finished with 166 receiving yards yesterday, and that wasn't even a career high. He had 175 back in week 3. 537 yards through 6 games, the most by a Vikings rookie wide receiver of all time, passing Randy Moss's record set in 1998 of 527 yards. So Justin Jefferson looks like a player. The Vikings secondary is absolutely brutal, so Kirk Cousins will have to air it out and take some shots. And in terms of yards per route run and fantasy points per route run, and I mentioned deep passes, Jefferson is among the leaders. You see Travis Fulgham there, another solid outing from Travis Fulgham. He looks like a player, and Adam Kaplan was on Jeff Ratcliffe's show and said that he expected him to be the starting X wide receiver the rest of the way. We're still waiting on Alshon Jeffrey to come back, but it doesn't even matter, I don't think. Fulgham has had a touchdown in 3 straight games, and he looks like a wide receiver 3 to me. And he's still widely available in Yahoo, NFL.com, Fantrax, CBS, wherever it is that you play. He's still available, whether people didn't believe in the big game against the Steelers. A very tough matchup against the Ravens, and he caught 6 of the 10 balls thrown his way for 75 yards. He has 16 grabs on 23 targets for just over 220 yards in his past 2 games. I already mentioned the schedule a bunch, but Giants, Cowboys, Giants, Browns, Seahawks, next 5. We're going to have Washington in there as well. And, Ertz is down and everybody seems to be down. So I think Fulgham makes for a really nice wide receiver. That's basically it. The big takeaways I had at the wide receiver position. Let's bring up the running back position and take a look at some of the target leaders here. And, another sexy board for my man George. And we got James White there with 9 targets, and they were playing from behind in New England, so that one makes a little sense. J.D. McKissic with 6, and here we go again with J.D. McKissic. You guys sick of me talking about J.D. McKissic? I don't blame you, but I don't think he's getting the respect. From a betting standpoint, he's not getting the respect. 3 straight weeks, he's been plus money. His props have been 2.5 catches, 2.5 catches, and 3.5 catches. Should have came on the show with that one. Had it over on FTNBets.com, and I'm just going to continue to bet it. This is the 3rd straight week McKissic has ranked inside the top 2 in running back targets for the week. He caught all 6 of the passes thrown his way in week 6, a total of 19 catches on 22 targets in his last 3 games. He's had at least 3 catches and 37 yards in 4 straight games now, and his 8 carries, 1 fewer than Antonio Gibson, by the way, in week 6, were tied for the most he's had in a game this year. And overall, McKissic's 23 catches are tied for the 5th most at the running back position. This is before Zeke's game. I've noticed as I'm talking to you, Zeke has a bunch of catches. It looks like just dump-offs. That could be good news for Zeke. It doesn't seem like he's having some success running the football. Andy Dalton is kind of throwing his way and dumping a few off. So his number is going to climb up. But before that game started, he was tied for 5th at the running back position. He was actually behind Zeke, so I don't think it'll matter. Tied for 5th at the running back position in catches with 23, and 31 targets were the 4th most at the position. And on top of that, the big takeaway for me in week 6, McKissic played 53% of the snaps, and Gibson only played 37%. I'm not saying to cut Gibson. Gibson's still involved on the ground. It's just a bad football team in Washington. I just like the fact that it's either going to McLaurin, or it's going to McKissic, or it's going to Gibson. Those are the 3 guys that are catching balls. Said McKissic was a PPR flex play. I think you can just consider him a PPR flex play the rest of the way, because they're just going to be chucking from behind, whether it's Alex Smith or if Haskins ever gets back in there, or Kyle Allen. It's going to be a whole lot of dump-offs because there's just not a lot of weapons there. And I think Antonio Gandy Golden left the game, not like he was doing anything, but he left the game as well. So take it for what it's worth, but he's a player. As you see, Gibson was in there as well with 5 targets, and Montgomery we already touched down, and then Boston Scott. Let's start with DeAndre Swift. Finally had that breakout game, and he was a buy low candidate for me. I write the trade article on Wednesdays. He was a buy low candidate for me. I said the big game eventually was going to come, and now the buy low window is closed. At least I think it is. If you're a Swift owner and you're a savvy owner, in the back of your mind that Matt Patricia can't be trusted, and that Adrian Peterson is still going to get a bulk of the snaps, and he's still going to get a bulk of the carries. But it was nice to see the breakout game finally happen for Swift. There's no doubt he is the best running back on this team and the highest ceiling, and maybe Patricia will finally start to lean on him a little bit more. I would keep Swift. Running back position is the running back depth out there is the landscape is not great. I would hold on to him. I don't know if you can start him with confidence. I think, depending on your situation, you can plug him in as a flex play because he has been involved through the air. 3 passes. That's how many he caught. The 4th time this season out of 5 games that he's finished, with 3 passes. And he had the 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 red zone carries. That was a positive. A career high 14 carries, 116 rushing yards, 18 opportunities. That's targets and carries, all career highs for Swift. But again, only played 37% of the snaps, and Adrian Peterson does seem like he just, Patricia brings him in. He's going to use him, unfortunately, but it was nice to see him to get those red zone carries. And, according to ESPN stats and info, I thought this was a pretty cool stat. Swift's 100 yards on the ground and Kenny Galladay's 100 yards through the air. The first time the Detroit Lions had a receiver and a running back hit their century mark in the same game since 2013. My goodness. Reggie Bush and Calvin Johnson. Jeez, it's been a long time since Matthew Stafford's had himself a running back, right? Get Adrian Peterson out of the way. Get him out of there. And let's see some more DeAndre Swift. My goodness. But if you had a ton of backs, if you were lucky enough to have a ton of running backs, you could consider selling high on Swift. But like I said, I think I would hold him. The final running back that I wanted to talk about is Myles Gaskin. And wow, he's turning out to be one of the best waiver wire ads of the season. It was all Matt Breida and Jordan Howard getting drafted, and Gaskin was not getting drafted. And if you pluck him up off the waiver wire, good for you. You have yourself, I think, a rock solid RB2. Most of all, just because of what he's doing through the air. But he finished with a season high 91 rushing yards in week 6, and he's reached a double-digit fantasy point mark in PPR formats in 5 of his 6 games. The one game he did in 9.2 fantasy points in week 4, so he almost got there, a decent floor. He caught all 4 of his targets. He has 27 grabs on 29 targets this season, so he's been very efficient in terms of catching the balls thrown his way from Fitzpatrick. And his catch total ranks 3rd among backs behind Alvin Kamara and Mike Davis. I'm assuming that Zeke is going to pass him this week. And his target total ranks 5th. Like I said, I just think he's a solid RB2. Howard got the healthy scratch tag. He's been stealing some of the goal line touches from Gaskin. But now Gaskin ranks inside the top 10 in red zone rushing opportunities and at least 21 opportunities, that's carries and targets in back-to-back weeks. And he's played at least 60% of the snaps in each game. He had 69% of the snaps on Sunday, which was very, very nice to see. So speaking of red zone targets and end zone targets, I wanted to give a shout out to my guy, Jeff Ratcliffe, who, we have a lot of free tools over at FTN Fantasy and FTN Daily and FTNBets.com. And, most recently end zone targets. And just taking a look here, end zone target leaders, Adam Thielen, Calvin Ridley, Jimmy Graham, 7 each, Mark Andrews, DK Metcalf, AJ Green, Mike Gesicki, 6 each, Aaron Jones, Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham Jr., Marquise Brown, Mike Evans, and Travis Kelce, 5 each. Not a lot to take away there, besides the fact that Gesicki has 6, and a disappointing performance from Gesicki in week 6. And, had the 2 targets, 0 catches, and it was the other 2 tight ends, and Cheyenne and Smith, who had the touchdown. So I think it's time that you could probably cut bait, considering that Miami is heading into the bye, and there's other tight ends. You can just play the matchup. So that's my one guy that I think that I would cut bait. And if you have somebody out there, and leave it in the comments, or maybe you're unsure, and you can just go ahead and leave that comment there, and I can touch on it on the next episode of Mean Streets. All right, on our way out, let's announce the winner. I left you hanging around for about 50 minutes or so. I appreciate you hanging around this whole time, but let's announce the winner here of the FTN Bets package, NFL, by the way. And as I announce, I'm just going to roll through some of the units won by some of our guys. So Brad Evans is up to 9 units won. What a beast. Kevin Adams up to 30 units won. What a beast. Ratcliffe is got positive units won. What a beast. How about our guy Noonan? Noonan has 25 units won. How about our guy Elliot Chris? 34 units. And then Noah Rudell's got himself 42 units, as I said, to the window. That show on Friday with Noonan, Elliot Chris, and Noah Rudell, like over 100 units. And it's an absolute must-watch show. So this FTN Bets package, maybe the most valuable package that we have to offer. And it's no disrespect to any of the other packages and all the other work that everybody's doing on daily and season long. But we've been really crushing bets as a team over at FTN, and I'm up to 20 units myself. So here we go. I got the loser Angels hat on the squad. Another turnover there from the Dallas Cowboys. Nothing makes me happier than to see that. And, last time I did this, I couldn't really... You guys couldn't see who actually won, but I promise you it was D-Gram. So I wrote in red pen for you guys to see. And the winner here this week is Thomas Shavara. Thomas Shavara, congratulations. I think he said he was a big Fade the Noise fan, Brad Evans, and I believe he subscribed to our YouTube page today. So again, subscribe. I don't know if you can see that. That's a little bit better. I'm learning as we go here through episode 3 of Mean Streets. Congratulations, Thomas. Just need to make an FTN account. I'll be in touch with you, and we'll get you set up with a subscription to FTNBets.com. Everybody else out there, still have your name in the hat. We'll still be giving away more packages here as Mean Streets is still continuing the very first week here on FTN, so they're keeping me around. Congratulations to Thomas. You are the winner of the FTN Bets package. If you want a subscription, you can use the promo code Meaney for a discount, or you can subscribe to our YouTube page, screenshot, and send that over to MeanStreetsEP3 @gmail.com. We'll get you in on the next draw. I'm Chris Meaney. Hopefully you have a fantastic week. We'll be back again on Tuesday, and we'll talk a little bit more about the waiver wire, but any questions, you can always hit me up at Chris Meaney. Take care, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.